Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of The Marketing Detective. Today, we're going to be tackling some digital trends to look out for. And are we about to enter a second roaring 20s as we did 100 years ago after the last pandemic? Well, fingers crossed, we are. So that's our focus today on The Marketing Detective. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of The Marketing Detective. We took a little detour in our last episode to pay tribute to our mothers for Mother's Day. It was a great and emotional and cathartic time we had. So if you didn't get to catch that, please just go up one from this episode or down from this episode to listen or watch that episode. Today, we've got a very special guest, a person that I've known for almost as long as I've been doing advertising sales, especially in the digital space. My guest today is a gentleman by the name of David Buonfiglio. He has been in the digital space since 2000, working in Boston. He has been on both sides of the coin, both a vendor and a broadcaster, and has worked with a number of sales organizations across the country, and right now is working with the largest of them, Nexstar Media Group. And he is currently the VP Digital of TVB's. And that is a brand new position that was created when he took that role. So with that, I'd like to welcome Dave. Dave?
Mitch, it's a pleasure to be with you. Thanks so much for having me.
Well, thank you. We've got a lot to cover today, and I just kind of want to jump in. And the reason I asked Dave to be my guest today is Dave is one of the most impressive and astute people in the digital space. And I was so blown away by the last presentation that I saw him do a couple of weeks ago that I emailed him, I think actually while you were doing the presentation, Dave, and asked if you could be my guest on the show. So thank you, Dave, for taking some time out to share with me and our viewers here. So the genesis of this topic today began with what you inspired and shared with us. But I also came across an article this week by the name of Daniel Elland. He is a chief strategy officer for a company called The Viewpoint. And he posed the question, are we about to enter the second roaring 20s after hopefully this pandemic? And so I want to kind of dissect a little of that article and obviously get your insight. And one of the things that he started with, Dave, was he said that those cookies were tasty, but they're going away. As we know, Google will end cookies in 2022. They gave us plenty of runway. They announced it in 2018 for the departure by 2022. And so the question I ask you, Dave, and from your perspective is, what should local businesses be doing right now to prepare for that transition?
Yeah, this is a big deal for certain. We've been relying on these third-party data cookies for a long time to help in the way we target this advertising. And clearly, we're going to be moving into the next version of this, whatever it looks like. So, and there's a lot of technology, I think, that's trying to figure out, what is the next thing. But I will tell you what I think of when I think of local business. The first thing I think about is a focus on, and perhaps a new focus on first-party data. Clearly, this move away from third-party data means that more and more businesses are going to need to rely on their own databases, email addresses, and everything that's associated with a local business's database, right? It's addresses and phone numbers and text numbers, and so there is a much higher, I think, dependence, and there will be a much higher dependence on local businesses being able to manage, maintain, and then leverage their own media data. We've called that owned media for some time, right? So I think this is first-party data is a really important part. Now, what local businesses do we know that are particularly good at this? Probably not many.
Hmm.
And, and this may not be in broadcasters' wheelhouse either. We're out selling our linear products and our digital products. But I feel like it's important for us to have this conversation and to provide some sort of thought leadership. I might use that phrase a couple of times during the course of this conversation, but I think it's important for us to do that for our local businesses. Um, with the pandemic and all, I mean, how important was email during those first months of us being all shut in at home?
Mm.
Um, Email was a lifeline for businesses that really didn't know how the heck they were going to communicate to their customers.
Mm.
That's one aspect of first party data. So that one is important, I think, for local business.
One of the things that we obviously will have available to us at Nexstar, being the largest media group with 197 stations in 116 markets, is we do have that first party data that we've been collecting over the years as people have agreed to accept those cookies. And I had to explain to a couple of folks when I was in Kansas City, they go, "What does that mean? Why do I keep getting asked this?" I said, because that is local businesses and companies that are saying, we want to use our own cookies, so they're building their own database. So to anyone asking what that question is, that is accepting the terms of those businesses to be able to collect data. Very, very interesting. So a little more bad news, unfortunately, for local businesses as we transition, and that is walled gardens. And walled gardens are basically cut off gardens of inventory that if you're not within that organization, you don't have access to that inventory. In the article, he calls it the walls are rising high. And, how are you seeing that challenge? How would you recommend you overcome that challenge for as a local business, Dave?
Well, I suppose what I would want to do, and this may be perhaps a little self-serving in that regard, but I feel like if the challenge is trying to get over those walled gardens, the thing that I would do is to work as best I can with people who are in charge of and control their own inventory, publishers,
Mm.
right? I feel like the more that the walled gardens get higher, the more that third-party data cookies go away, that those of us who publish trusted content on the internet, who control our own inventory, who control the revenues that we are associate with what we're doing online, we're going to be better prepared and better positioned than others who rely perhaps entirely on third-party data and audience extension products. So if I'm a local business, I'm trying to get close with the local TV stations and to whatever extent other local media groups in that market can help. I think between the local media companies and players in a market, I think they're going to be really well suited to help that kind of a business, to help the local businesses kind of get what they need and get past the concerns for these walled gardens. Listen, Google's going to be powerful. It's just going to be, Facebook is going to be super powerful. But listen, local media in aggregate is very, very powerful too. So, to the extent that local businesses can partner with and dive in, and really allow those media companies to help them, I think that'll be important.
I couldn't agree more. I think that those partnerships that we are forging at a local level are going to be very important. So I like that idea of reaching out to those who have robust publishing and great content. We've been talking about content is king for a long time, and I always say content is king, and this is my quote: content is king, but data is its queen, because great engagement leads to great data. And I shared that this week with a pretty savvy digital agency, and they loved that. And I said, we're stealing it. I go, this is, by the way, was a very savvy music music industry agency, a name you would know, but I can't say. But they liked it so much. I said, well, you better give us some credit and we better partner together if we're going to make that work. So let me ask you this. Obviously, another big change that's coming is out of home. And for those who don't know what that is, those are billboards and transportation venues and things like that. As all of those have been migrating over the last couple of years to digital, how important is something like that to a local business strategy? First of all, I have to ask the question, in your opinion, is it effective? I know that every medium has a purpose and a goal and an objective, but in this ever-changing digital world, where do you think that fits in?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and one for us to ponder, right? I first of all, just as a sort of a plain old user of media and of someone who notices stuff. I love some of the digital out of home stuff that I see.
Yeah.
Particularly when billboards at train stops become interactive, and billboards, have different opportunities for interaction and updating. So I think I'm kind of excited about it from a user standpoint. However, I'm not so sure that feels like to me to be more of a national advertiser play right now than a local advertiser play. The one tactic that I think is really finding its space right now, finding its rhythm, is in QR codes. So QR codes obviously are those little, postage stamp, funky looking things that you can scan, and you can now scan with your your phone apps, and it directs you. It's like a hyperlink to a particular website. And obviously we're seeing that in restaurants so that you can link to menus, and we're seeing it in a number of different places, including, by the way, if we want to talk about this, we're seeing it on television commercials too.
Yes.
And that's been an interesting, sort of next step for this thing that, sort of came and went 10 years ago. But the QR code is one that I think locally can have some neat applications for local advertisers, on air and some and printed materials and things like that. But the general direction and place for digital out of home, for me, feels a little bit more like it hasn't yet figured out how to scale locally yet. That's just my own opinion.
Well, again, the reason you're honest, we value that opinion. One of the things that about the QR codes I wanted to mention is that we've got a really fantastic digital sales manager in Chicago by the name of Megan Glenn. And she came to me with this idea of saying, hey, can I test out this QR code with some of their creative that they had on television, and especially what they actually were running on OTT. And it has really been a game changer for them. And so you were right on where local stations should be using that. One other thing I noticed, I flew back in from Kansas City yesterday, and as I got off my plane, I saw a guy standing in front of one of those interactive boards, and he scans his ticket, and it not only says, here's where the gate that you need to go to, but then it says, are you hungry? And it lists a couple of restaurants that were near the gate. And I sat there and I was just looking at this, and he kind of looks at me. I'm like, oh, sorry, I was just looking at the screen. But I think that's kind of some of that play that you were talking about.
Yeah.
Not quite local, because, by the way, they were all national brands that were listed there. So I think you were right on with that observation that it's kind of more of a national footprint rather than a local one. As we transition now to something that has been so popular in the last couple of years, connected television, or OTT, that's that streaming experience that you have at home. This year, or by 2021, there will be $10.8 billion invested in that space here in the United States. That's not globally, that's just in the United States. Obviously, we saw a huge uptick at this time last year, as people were at home and watching a lot of television. I actually posted back then a picture. It says, "You've reached the end of Netflix," because I kind of feel like I did that during the pandemic. I probably would do that even outside of a pandemic. That's how much I watch. So what is your advice to local businesses that just are hesitant to step into that world? What would you tell them?
Okay. So, Mitch, I think you know this, but I've been working on a white paper for the broadcast television industry for OTT for about 6 months now, and we'll be rolling it out next month in a webinar that TVB will host, and it is called the ABCs of OTT. It is and the feedback that I got when I asked the question was, what sort of material do you want about OTT? And this, of course, is for salespeople, not necessarily local business. Mm-hmm. I'm sure there is a great deal of overlap in that regard. And the answer was, I just want the basics. I want to be able to understand the foundational knowledge I need so that I can do my job and sell this material properly. So that's what I've been working on and writing for about 4 months. So, Mitch, I got a lot, there's a lot rolling around in my head about this subject. But if I were to talk to a local advertiser about this, I think the first thing I would do is figure out how familiar they really are with streaming television and the ads that are available in streaming television. The first question I would ask that advertiser is, do you watch streaming television besides Netflix? And if the answer is yes, then I would, I dig a little deeper so that they have an understanding of that you can get ads when you're watching streaming television. And if they said no, then I have to double back and say, okay, now I got to teach you about what these ads look like when you're streaming, when you're streaming television. So the first part of that is, sort of basic, foundational. Do you understand what OTT and the advertising is? Okay, so I'd start there. And then I would say, listen, and this is feeding the TV guys, certainly, but why wouldn't you want to partner with the folks who live, breathe, and think television 24/7? Your company and so many others in broadcast have built out these very, very robust OTT platforms, with great premium inventory in places and inventory of your own local newscasts and things along those lines. And, and I happen to think, and I might be, a little jaded here, but I think that the OTT platforms that the broadcasters have created are frankly second to none. Mm-hmm. And so I would recommend them, frankly, depending upon what our situation was and all, I would tell that local advertiser, sample them all. No one has solved this thing perfectly. No one's come up with the magic bullet on this. And so I would recommend them sampling as many OTT platforms as possible and then comparing them and seeing which ones provided, the transparency and the data and the economy, that you would hope and expect. So that would be that's step one, and I'll stop if you've got any other follows on that, because there's a lot to it.
So, and it's funny that you mentioned, referencing whether or not they're watching streaming beyond Netflix. HBO Max just announced that it's going to go to a commercial insertion for $9.99 a month. The advantage there, obviously, you get commercials. The disadvantage is if you like watching those movies at home when they premiere in the theaters, you won't have that if you go to the $9.99. But I just thought about how much inventory is going to open up there. So I always ask the question, tell me a little about your streaming experience. Are you seeing commercials and you notice you can't fast forward to those yet? Well, you could be there too. And all of a sudden it becomes a little more realistic to them and they start to see themselves on that screen, no pun intended. So shifting from that creative, I want to talk a little bit about, or shifting from connected TV to creative. One of the things the article talked about was the ad formats, and our advertisers and local businesses need to be rethinking the way they look at their advertising creative. They're saying that the average viewer now is about 8 seconds. Which is blows me away, considering, but then again, it doesn't, because you think about how many images we come across and how quickly we're able to connect with that. What would you tell local businesses that are seeing that 8 seconds and going, oh, should I be rethinking my creative?
Yeah. Well, and this concept of short is not new to us, right? Even, what was it? Within relatively recently, YouTube rolled out 6-second ads for that platform. Well, we've been, from a video standpoint, we've been trying to figure this out for a while. How do we give our, provide what we want in a short period of time? So there are a couple of things about that. One is that, whatever we can do to put our advertising in front of people who will watch the full commercial. That's that's what we want. We want high levels of viewership engagement, typically measured in, for the most part, how long people spend watching a particular program. And I think so. OTT is obviously an interesting, place for that, because those commercial breaks are typically shorter than what you might see in a broadcast linear environment. And, they've got the little countdown clock. So you have some, you know where you are in this, they're non-skippable. And so I think that, the viewership or the view through rate, or the rate at which people watch an entire commercial on OTT is very, very high, very high. So, and then if you connect that with some of the really important programming that local TV stations provide, and local news, weather, and sports, where people are not typically recording that; they're watching it live, and so there are ways for advertisers to deal with it and to work toward trying to make sure that people are watching their commercials as long as possible. Sure, there is this sort of line of thinking that try to fit what the most important thing in the first 6 seconds, I get that. But any efforts that we can make, and there are efforts now, there are techniques that we can do to put those messages into places where we know people are most likely to watch the entire message.
And the last thing I want to ask you before I kind of shift to what you're seeing in terms of digital trends is, in the article it talked about content safety, making sure that your ad units are running next to the things that you want to be next to. I had a horror story a couple of years ago where a local business that I worked with in San Antonio was two brothers. They were two Christian plumbers, and they were running on a mobile platform, not with the company that I'm with now, with another company. And it turned out that 40% of their highest click-through came from a single app. And they were blown away by it, but they go, I'd never heard of this app, but it seems like it's the most engaging. And he says, so could you explain to me what Grindr is? And I said, well, how do I explain this? Well, it's, he goes, is that like it looks like is that a dating app? I go, well, they're connecting. He goes, oh, is it like Christian mingle? And I said, well, they're mingling in the biblical sense, but not exactly what you're probably looking for. And I said, this is why you have to be careful about where that content runs, first of all. So that brand safety is important. So of course he was pretty floored when I told him what that was. And he goes, can you have us removed from that particular? Yes, that's already done. But contextual targeting, which has been around just like QR codes have been around. As you know, we've been in this business long enough. QR codes is nothing new, but contextual targeting is nothing new. But it's creating a new birth now because people are are using that. And for our listeners today, contextual targeting is simple. They find the keywords in an article, and then we find similar ads or brands that would be associated. So if you're talking about rotating your tires every couple thousand miles, then maybe you have a tire company that's advertising right there in that ad unit next to the article. What are your thoughts about contextual, and how are you seeing this in the industry being played out?
Yeah, so love that story. I mean, it's the beauty of selling locally, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Okay, so the first thing I'm going to mention is this concept of is a concept that gets a lot of play in digital, but it's really relevant to us in television, which is mostly known as the halo effect. Mm. So the halo effect is the effect that the content that an advertiser or an advertisement is presented in has an impact on how people see the advertisement. Same ad, two different locations, one sort of, to your point, one brand safe, what we might call premium content and premium quality. Mm. And your user experience and your user response to seeing that ad in a different location is significantly different. And so the halo effect is something that I try to remind our sellers a lot about, because local news and weather and information is predominantly brand safe. It is not politicized. It's not fake news. It's not, user generated content. And so, this idea of where in all impressions are not the same, and where the ad shows up is important. Mm-hmm. So for those of us who publish premium content, we should be making sure that we're, making a big deal about that with our advertisers. Now, as it relates to contextual, again, all I will say about that is that, and it's contextual, right? Isn't contextual usually assumed or sort of applied to lifestyle content, right? Mm-hmm. But I think that local news is sort of underappreciated when it comes to this kind of contextual advertising, and so this is coming about more and more because of what's happening in that third-party data world, mm-hmm. right? Where there's no data required here. We know what the content is, and so anyone who's in that content, might have an affinity for the information and for the category of business that's in there. So I like contextual targeting. It's making a return, and I think we should be, those of us in local premium publishing should be able to take advantage of some of that.
Mm. One of the things, as the kind of wrap up of the dissection of that article and some of the things we talked about today is, one of the things that's going to be affected immediately is what you just mentioned again, is programmatic and programmatic buying, which is going to be take an immediate hit on this, as third-party data is not going to be available. And I love what you said about the local content. You're right. It's not user generated. It's not politicized. It's news. It's content. It's information in the local market, and you need to trust where you're getting that information. And I think we learned that from the last two election cycles. Don't even have to beat a dead horse on that, on where people are getting information. So Dave, any other digital trends, anything that you're seeing out in the field when you're talking with the many, many media groups that you work with and salespeople around the country, anything that really stands out to you?
Well, I'll tell you what, Mitch, as much as I for a long time, I have been a believer in sort of trying to have in your toolkit as many digital products and services as possible. It always felt like to me to be that made you the most relevant when it came time to talk to advertisers about digital. But I got to tell you, in this world where, in this digital world where, we are so affected by and drawn to the bright, shiny object, OTT is a noon sun in Death Valley. It's just getting everybody's attention, and everybody wants to know how to do it, what it is, how to do it better. And by the way, I'm on this. I'm working on it. But here's the truth. The truth of the matter is that OTT and the targeting associated with OTT, all of that is where digital was, frankly, in around 2005, and where mobile was in 2010. We are really early on in this. And so that, but there's a great deal of gravity pulling us in that direction.
Yes.
So, and I get that. It allows us to, play both offense and defense. OTT does. It allows us to say that, with its data and its targeting and it's got that additional feature related to it. And then we get to be able to say to somebody whose objection is everybody's streaming. No one's watching broadcast anymore. We know that's not true. We have the research to defend ourselves in that one. But we can also say, well, funny you should say that. I've got this really great OTT platform that I can help you do. So I will tell you that I get the OTT trending. This last year has accelerated the use of OTT. People, some experts say that it's accelerated it by 5 years. That without the pandemic, it would have taken another 5 years for us to get this far in OTT. So, listen, the pandemic has accelerated a lot of things, right? Yeah. And from a media perspective, OTT is one. The only other thing that I would say is trending is, these social media. I think 2 years ago, there were 4 social media platforms that advertisers really kind of paid attention to. And now there's just a whole lot more of them. And between, TikTok and all of the other ones that have to not force myself to, but making sure that I get on and look at. That one is challenging because everyone, again, bright shiny object thing, right?
Yeah.
What's going on with the latest and greatest in this? So there's a lot of interest in these new social media platforms, and I think to a certain extent that's one that we have to just be patient on and figure out which ones really are going to stick and which ones can be useful for business.
Yeah, it was this time last year that TikTok was just kind of really coming to its own. Pandemic kind of accelerated that. All the kids were on it. And I had people asking me, well, should I get a TikTok account? I said, yes, get a TikTok account because, you never know when this is going to. So they're just now starting to monetize that. So like you said, there's a long way to go there. As we wrap up today, I want to share a few of what I call my final thoughts, Dave, and it's things that I feel like I've gleaned from our conversation today. So my final thoughts on this, are we experiencing or going to experiencing the second roaring 20s here this year? And it starts with what you talked about, focusing on that first party data, how important that is to start owning that data. And as we talked about walled gardens and limited access to inventory, the importance of partnerships with, if I might add, Nexstar Media Group, as one of the ways that you can do that. Obviously, there are a lot of media groups out there that also have that access. You talked about QR codes, and yes, how popular they are, and that they can be an effective way to be integrated into your TV and into your TV experience. We also talked about OTT and how important it is to understand more about the streaming, not only identifying how we watch it, but how we consume it, but how we can use our own user experience to maybe shape our marketing strategy down the road. When we talked about contextual targeting, you talked about the halo effect. I love that. We've got quite a few NBC affiliates, and we talk about the halo effect of the Olympics on local businesses. So I like how you talked about how the halo effect will help people understand and perceive you as a company locally. Then obviously in OTT, we also talked about here the acceleration and you're probably right. It's probably about a 5-year acceleration rate, during the pandemic. So Dave, could you share with folks, and we're going to put a slate up on the screen for you, how they can reach you if they want to reach out directly to you?
Sure. Well, thanks. My email is david@tvb.org. And our website, as you can see, is TVB. It's actually www.tvb.org as well.
.org. Okay, instead of .com.
Fine. Okay. Yeah, and I'm on LinkedIn, and all with the first name, last name spellings.
All right.
So happy to talk to obviously we're a membership company, right? So TVB has members, and frankly, just about every broadcaster out there is a member, so that's good. There are a couple who aren't, but so I hope that those who are members or watching are familiar with what we do with TVB, the business development team that I'm a part of. We do research, we do advocacy, and so it's as you said, I've been in this group for 2 years, coming up on 2 years actually, and it's been a really, really great experience. Really fun to be involved with so many really smart people and trying to work hard at this, at the digital side. So, and thank you, Mitch. Thanks for having me. This has been really fun.
Well, Dave, you are one of those smart people, and that's why I like to always pick your brain. You make me walk away thinking about a million different things, and I take copious notes when I have conversations with you. So thank you for being so generous with your time. If you would like for us to solve a mystery in an upcoming episode, our podcast, please submit your mystery at my email address at mwest@nexstar.tv and put Marketing Detective in the subject line. Well, I feel like we solved a few more mysteries today, and there are so many more to do. So I hope that you'll join me 2 weeks from today, as my guest will be a gentleman by the name of Mike Apple. Mike has been in the automotive world for over 30 years, working on national brands with national agencies such as Ford, and not only Ford, but with the Marines. It was one of his accounts for about 20 years. So if the few, the proud, the Marines, that was him. He'll be my guest in our next episode, and I hope that you'll join us. Well, until next time, America, I'm your marketing detective, Mitch West.